When I first strolled through the tree-lined streets of Willowbend Park, I marveled at the synergy of modern townhouses and gentle, rolling green spaces. It offered a sense of suburban calm I found irresistible. My job, though intense and often requiring swift communication, could be done mostly from home, making reliable internet access a must. I imagined quiet days of teleconferencing, friendly neighbors exchanging greetings, and a mild but helpful homeowners association that maintained the shared amenities. I never anticipated that a single HOA member, labeled Karen for her overbearing and petty nature, would nearly bring the entire neighborhood to chaos by shutting down our communal Wi-Fi in the midst of a statewide emergency. It was only after her reckless act that she discovered my sister, Serena, was none other than the director of the State Communication Authority, an unfortunate surprise for Karen, but the lifeline we needed to hold her accountable. But let's start with the simpler details. My name is Noel Patterson. By trade, I'm a remote project coordinator for a major tech company. I often handle urgent tasks that require stable internet connections at all hours. My sister, Serena, heads up the State Communication Authority, meaning she oversees large-scale telecommunication infrastructures and emergency broadcasting networks. It's a high-profile position, but we grew up in an unassuming environment, so we rarely flaunt it. I wanted to remain just another neighbor in Willowbend Park. Little did I know that an HOA Karen would test that anonymity, leading me to reveal my connections and expertise when our entire community's well-being was at stake. I found Willowbend Park's general vibe lovely. A communal pool, a small clubhouse, well-kept walking trails. The HOA fees covered these amenities, plus a neighborhood-wide wireless internet plan, an unusual but attractive perk. Instead of individual households each paying for internet, we had a robust communal plan that spanned the entire complex. It was a major selling point for busy professionals like me and for older residents who appreciated a no-fuss arrangement. Speeds were decent, coverage was stable, and I could bounce from my living room to the courtyard without losing signal. Karen, though, had been part of the HOA's leadership from early on. Officially named Brittany Alderton, she insisted neighbors address her as Ms. Alderton in formal settings. But behind closed doors, nearly everyone called her Karen for her penchant for micromanaging and complaining about small infractions. She was in her early 50s, wearing neat pastel suits, hair always in a precision bob. The rumor was that she had once forced a neighbor to repaint their front door 3 times to match the approved shade of teal. When I moved in, she greeted me with a courtesy pamphlet, Willowbend Park Code of Conduct. Her tight-lipped smile and measuring gaze made me uneasy. She flicked her eyes over my house, checking for potential rule violations. Then she said, with artificial cheer, "We're a tightly run community, Miss Patterson. I trust you'll abide by the standards we hold dear." I forced a polite smile, unprepared for how far her standards extended. For a few weeks, life was peaceful. I set up my office in a spare bedroom, tested the communal Wi-Fi, which worked smoothly, and occasionally used the clubhouse for a change of scenery. Meanwhile, Karen patrolled the sidewalks, complaining about trivialities. A neighbor's wind chimes were too noisy, or the kids' sidewalk chalk disturbed the pristine aesthetic. People tolerated her, rolling their eyes. None guessed she'd soon sabotage the entire internet system over a petty noise grievance, especially on a day when we needed connectivity more than ever. At the monthly HOA meeting, I saw a glimpse of Karen's controlling nature. She sat at the head of the table, reeling off new regulations, limiting the hours kids could use the communal pool, imposing a ban on unapproved garden ornaments, and so on. Other board members looked exhausted. A few neighbors timidly objected to some rules, but Karen bulldozed them with a practiced wave of her hand. It was clear she relished her power. When the topic of neighborhood internet usage came up, Karen frowned, claiming that some residents stream content at all hours, hogging bandwidth. Another board member, Ms. Colt, pointed out that the system was designed to handle high usage. Karen demanded that the board consider quiet hours from midnight to 6 a.m. for heavier internet use. People balked. This was obviously an overreach. The discussion was tabled without resolution, to Karen's visible annoyance. After the meeting, I chatted with a younger couple who admitted they'd had run-ins with Karen. She'd threatened them with fines if they didn't reduce late-night streaming. They were perplexed, as the HOA contract never specified limiting streaming. I told them not to worry too much. Hopefully the rest of the board wouldn't back Karen's absurd idea. Yet a twinge of unease settled in me. She seemed to fixate on controlling the communal Wi-Fi, and I suspected trouble was brewing. Still, I had no clue how drastically she'd act, or that a looming statewide emergency would elevate the stakes far beyond petty HOA drama. Late August arrived with scorching days, occasionally punctuated by thunderstorms. The state weather agencies started alerting the public of a massive tropical storm forming off the coast, potentially intensifying into a severe hurricane. My sister, Serena, texted me updates, cautioning that the state might issue emergency instructions if it made landfall near us. She oversaw vital communication lines, ensuring warnings and advisories reached everyone. Meanwhile, I read news bulletins about possible evacuations or shelter-in-place orders, depending on the storm's path. As the storm approached, Willowbend Park's communal Wi-Fi took on even greater importance. Many neighbors planned to track weather updates online, and local authorities recommended staying connected for official announcements. My job demanded I remain on call, coordinating a major project that required stable internet. For older residents, too, the communal Wi-Fi was their link to emergency portals. If the electricity flickered, but we had backup systems for the router, many hoped to rely on it for real-time instructions. But Karen apparently had a meltdown about noise. The evening before the storm was set to intensify, a group of teens gathered in the clubhouse, streaming music videos and playing online games. The volume was a bit high, I heard, but nothing catastrophic. Karen confronted them, ordering them to leave. She railed that their rowdy streaming sessions threatened the community. They responded with typical teenage apathy. Furious, Karen left, vowing to shut down this nonsense. I only heard about this confrontation secondhand. But the next morning, as dark clouds loomed overhead, I discovered the horrifying consequence. The communal Wi-Fi was completely offline. Trying to reconnect on my phone, I found no signal. Other neighbors frantically asked me if I had any service. The HOA message board was abuzz with confusion. Then someone said they saw Karen messing around in the utility closet that housed the main router hardware. My heart sank. I rushed to the clubhouse, where a small crowd had gathered. The building's main door was locked, which was unusual. A sign in Karen's neat handwriting read, "Clubhouse closed for maintenance. No trespassing." People hammered on the door, demanding the Wi-Fi be restored, especially with the storm approaching. No answer. Next, we tried Ms. Colt from the board, but she had no key. She said Karen insisted on handling the internet situation personally. The tension mounted. We needed to track the rapidly shifting storm. Already, local highways were congested, and authorities might issue mandatory evacuations soon. But without stable internet, many residents were cut off from real-time updates, especially older neighbors without data plans on their phones. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Serena from the State Communication Authority. She told me that the storm was intensifying faster than expected, and the governor was preparing a statewide emergency declaration. She asked if we were set on supplies and communication, urging me to stay online for official instructions. My frustration boiled. "Serena," I said, "our HOA official literally cut our communal Wi-Fi because of a petty grudge. We might be going in blind." Serena was aghast. She offered to call me with direct updates. But as the day wore on, phone networks also grew strained by the surge in usage. Some neighbors had no phone data at all. Many who relied on the communal Wi-Fi for basic connectivity were effectively offline. One older man, Mr. Danner, nearly had a panic attack realizing he couldn't contact his distant family. The mood grew more desperate, reminiscent of how reliant we'd become on that shared network. We tried calling Karen, leaving messages demanding an explanation. No response. The storm clouds gathered ominously overhead, winds picking up. If we needed evacuation notices or local flood warnings, we'd be stuck. My fury soared, but I resolved to find a way to restore the network. I asked Ms. Colt if we could forcibly open the clubhouse. She hesitated, fearful of legal repercussions. But at this point, Karen's sabotage was risking community safety. We decided to attempt contacting the local police, who brushed it off as an HOA dispute. So, we were left on our own. As the storm approached, neighbors banded together, manually checking on each other. Some with cell data tried to glean official updates, but signals were spotty. Late that evening, the sky unleashed torrential rain and powerful gusts of wind. The state's emergency management offices broadcast evacuation orders for certain low-lying areas. Our region was borderline, so we needed swift, continuous updates to know if or when to flee. Without the communal Wi-Fi, many were left guessing. I hopped on a group call with Serena, who informed me that a partial evacuation was recommended for certain neighborhoods near floodplains. Willowbend Park was on the edge of that zone. She strongly suggested we prepare to evacuate if the storm track shifted slightly. I tried sharing that with neighbors face-to-face, but the word spread unevenly. Some people worried about leaving if it wasn't mandatory. Confusion reigned, all because we lacked a stable, communal source of official info. Meanwhile, Karen was nowhere to be found. Her house was dark. Rumors said she'd driven to stay with relatives upstate, ironically leaving the rest of us in the lurch. The night stretched with howling winds, water pooling in roads, and anxious families not sure if they should load up cars. Miss Colt and I tried to ring doorbells, telling people what I gleaned from Serena's calls. We advised them to be ready to evacuate. Some packed, others waited. In my mind, this was criminal negligence on Karen's part. She'd effectively cut off an entire community's emergency lifeline out of petty rage. If anyone was harmed due to missed alerts, she'd be responsible. I texted Serena the details, and she was livid. She said the state's communication laws might apply, punishing anyone who deliberately disables emergency communication access. I realized we might have grounds for a severe legal claim once the storm passed. Yet for the moment, survival came first. The storm battered us until dawn. Trees snapped, power lines flickered, though miraculously, we kept electricity in most parts of Willowbend Park. By morning, the worst had passed. Minor flooding hit some streets, but we avoided catastrophic damage. We were lucky. If the storm track had shifted, we could have faced a mandatory evacuation that half the neighborhood might not have known about in time. Morning light revealed fallen branches, scattered debris, and tense neighbors exhaling relief that the damage wasn't worse. The local news, accessible via battery radios or cell data, for those who had it, reported that the storm had veered just enough to spare us from direct landfall. Some neighborhoods not far from ours had been severely flooded. Our situation could have been much worse. Even so, the communal Wi-Fi remained dead, courtesy of Karen's sabotage. People demanded answers, outraged that she vanished during the crisis. Ms. Colt summoned an emergency HOA meeting to address the fiasco. Word spread that I had connections at the state level, so folks urged me to escalate the matter. Ms. Colt gave me the clubhouse master key, explaining that Karen had changed the locks, but she had a spare set. We marched into the clubhouse, found the maintenance sign, and inside the utility closet, we discovered the router equipment physically unplugged and certain cables slashed. Karen had apparently vandalized it thoroughly. My anger soared seeing the cables cut, a deliberate act that would cost time and money to fix. Meanwhile, Miss Colt was in near tears. How could she do this in the middle of an emergency? I phoned Serena to update her. She expressed shock and said the State Communication Authority might consider legal action under statutes that protect critical communication infrastructure during declared emergencies. She told me she'd coordinate with local officials to expedite an investigation. If Karen thought she'd get away with flipping a switch out of annoyance, she'd soon learn she'd triggered an avalanche of legal and public backlash. The emergency HOA meeting took place in the clubhouse's main hall, with partial power still intact. The damaged router lay on a table as grim evidence. Furious neighbors demanded that Karen be stripped of her HOA position. Some called for pressing charges. Ms. Colt apologized profusely, saying the board never authorized such sabotage. We learned from another board member that Karen's meltdown after the teens' late-night usage was the final straw. She'd insisted they teach those brats a lesson by restricting Wi-Fi. But the board refused to do so unilaterally. In her rage, she must have decided to handle it herself. Then, after disabling the system, she apparently fled to avoid the immediate fallout. The word criminal floated around as we realized how close we'd come to a bigger disaster if the storm had hit us fully. During the meeting, many turned to me. They knew I had a powerful sister in the Communication Authority. "What can we do?" some asked, looking desperate for justice. I laid out potential steps. File a police report about property damage and sabotage of essential infrastructure. Contact the state with evidence that Karen's actions jeopardized public safety during a declared emergency. The HOA board could also vote to remove her from office, pending a formal hearing, and potentially sue for damages to the router, which could cost thousands to replace. All these steps garnered enthusiastic support. People were done with Karen's tyranny. That night, Ms. Colt and I compiled a thorough report, attaching photos of the cut cables, the timeline of the storm, and witness accounts. I emailed it to Serena, who confirmed she'd forward it to the relevant state agencies. The next day, a local police officer arrived, took statements, and opened an investigation for possible criminal charges. The tide had turned against Karen. Despite the swirling condemnation, Karen had not returned. Some suspected she'd remain away until the dust settled. Meanwhile, we scrambled to repair the communal Wi-Fi. A specialized tech team spent days rerunning cables and reprogramming the router system. The cost was significant, money the HOA had to pull from emergency reserves. Ms. Colt lamented that it would likely require a special assessment, ironically punishing the entire neighborhood for Karen's sabotage. That only fueled more resentment toward her. Publicly, the story began to spread. A local news station caught wind of HOA official sabotage's neighborhood internet during Hurricane Alert. They interviewed neighbors who told how they'd lost crucial updates. Footage of the storm's aftermath showcased downed limbs, while some residents described how frightened they were, uncertain if they needed to evacuate. The press hammered home how dangerous it is to block communication in an emergency, hinting that criminal charges might be forthcoming. I gave a brief interview, carefully explaining that we were in contact with the State Communication Authority and that an official inquiry was ongoing. I didn't mention my sister by name, but the anchor pressed, "Do you anticipate serious legal consequences for Ms. Alderton?" I responded yes, that her sabotage likely violated both local and state laws protecting essential communications. Public sentiment quickly turned ferocious. Online forums labeled Karen a reckless menace. By week's end, the police had enough evidence to charge Karen with malicious mischief and reckless endangerment. The official arrest warrant was filed. Now, we awaited her reappearance. Some folks speculated she might have run away permanently, but as it turned out, she eventually came home, trying to salvage her position, only to face a wall of outrage and a stunned realization of who I was connected to. Karen returned one afternoon, driving her SUV into her driveway. Neighbors spotted her, phone calls spread, and a small crowd gathered outside her home, demanding explanations. She tried ignoring them, hoisting her suitcase, but the local police arrived soon after. With the sabotage evidence in hand, they asked her to come to the station for questioning. She looked rattled, stammering denials about just needing some quiet. Then an officer calmly recited the charges related to the destruction of communal property and interference with emergency communications. She gave me a venomous glance from across her lawn, as if I were personally responsible for her predicament. In a sense, I was proud to be. My sister and I had escalated the legal scrutiny. Now Karen saw the consequences of her twisted vendetta. She hissed something about overblown nonsense. The officers escorted her to their squad car for a formal statement. The crowd parted, some snapping photos or shaking their heads in disgust. Her power, once fearsome in Willowbend Park, now seemed to crumble under the weight of public condemnation and legal repercussions. Meanwhile, Serena texted me that the State Communication Authority had referred the matter to the State Attorney General's office. If indicted, Karen could face substantial fines or even jail time, especially because the sabotage occurred during a declared emergency, making it a potential felony. I relayed that update to Ms. Colt and the other board members, who looked stunned. Rarely does an HOA spat escalate to a felony, but Karen's sabotage was no trifling matter. Karen spent hours at the police station before being released on bail. She returned home, but the next morning, the HOA board convened an emergency session to remove her from all leadership roles. The motion passed unanimously. A hush of relief washed over the neighborhood. Karen's reign was effectively over, but the legal battle was just beginning for her. With Karen dethroned and facing criminal charges, Willowbend Park began picking up the pieces. The newly repaired Wi-Fi system was operational, and the storm's damage was mostly cleared. People reveled in the normalcy of streaming shows, checking email, and sharing neighborhood updates online. The tension of the past days lingered as a cautionary memory. If we'd been directly hit by the hurricane, the sabotage could have spelled real tragedy. Some board members approached me, inquiring if I believed the HOA could sue Karen for the repair costs. The answer was yes, likely in civil court. Ms. Colt indicated they might do so, though the outcome of the criminal case would come first. Meanwhile, many neighbors posted heartfelt thanks on the community forum, grateful for those who stepped up to coordinate and share updates during the outage. They singled me out, praising my sister's swift intervention at the state level. I humbly deflected, explaining that it was a team effort. Karen, hunkered down in her house, tried to claim she was misunderstood. She posted a rambling message on the HOA message board, insisting she only unplugged the router to restore peace and never meant to hamper emergency alerts. The response was brutal. Neighbors demanded she stop lying. Someone discovered the cut cables, confirming it wasn't just a plug pulled. She quickly took down her post, presumably upon legal counsel's advice. Days later, an official from the State Communication Authority arrived, verifying the vandalism to the router. They interviewed residents, took photos, and concluded that Karen's actions violated state statutes protecting public communication lines, especially during declared emergencies. This all but sealed the case for the state attorney general. Karen's prospect of dodging serious repercussions grew slim. The day of Karen's arraignment drew near. The entire neighborhood watched with morbid fascination as the local news covered her upcoming court date. She faced multiple charges: destruction of property, disruption of critical communication networks, and reckless endangerment. Additionally, the city demanded restitution for the cost of repairs and emergency services. Even some smaller charges, like trespassing in restricted utility areas, piled up. She arrived at the courthouse in a subdued outfit, lacking her usual swagger. A swirl of cameras captured her tense expression. Reporters asked if she had anything to say to Willowbend Park residents. She offered no comment, rushing inside. In the courtroom, the prosecutor laid out the basics: how she forcibly disabled the communal Wi-Fi by physically damaging the router, how it occurred during a state of emergency, and how hundreds were cut off from vital updates. Karen's defense attorney argued it was an impulsive mistake, fueled by frustration over excessive noise. But the judge's stern face indicated little sympathy. The sabotage was no small act, especially with the potential for life or death consequences if the storm had worsened. The judge scheduled a full trial, denying any easy dismissal. Karen left, looking haggard, no longer the unstoppable HOA titan. The media labeled her the sabotage suspect of Willowbend, intensifying her public disgrace. We in Willowbend Park carried on, relieved she could no longer bully us. The board replaced her with Ms. Colt as interim president. The new era began with promises of a gentler approach, focusing on actual community needs. Freed from Karen's iron hand, neighbors felt comfortable, forging a more cohesive environment. Meanwhile, the legal process advanced. It was a matter of time before the final reckoning arrived for Karen. As the trial approached, tension rose again. Prosecutors compiled thorough evidence: photos of the severed cables, statements from the board, a timeline correlating with the storm's emergency alerts. People from the State Communication Authority testified that the sabotage could have prevented crucial alerts, referencing the declared state of emergency. My sister, Serena, served as an expert witness, explaining how crucial continuity of communication is during natural disasters. It was a strong case, leaving little room for Karen's defense to spin it as a trivial act. During the trial, I attended in the gallery, quietly observing. Karen's attorney attempted to paint her as a stressed-out resident, unprepared for the unexpected consequences of her actions. They tried to show that real-time updates were still available by radio or phone data, so the risk was allegedly minimal. But the prosecution hammered home that many neighbors relied solely on communal Wi-Fi. Testimonies from older residents underscored how they nearly missed important advisories. Evidence of Karen's earlier threats about taking away internet privileges further undermined the accidental narrative. After 3 days, the jury deliberated for only a few hours. The verdict: guilty on multiple counts, including felony interference with emergency communications. The judge spoke harshly, citing Karen's disregard for public safety. Sentencing would follow, but it was clear she faced a stiff penalty, likely heavy fines and possibly jail time. She listened, pale-faced, as the jury foreperson read the verdict. The entire courtroom sense was that justice was served. Outside, neighbors expressed relief. Some were sad it came to this, but recognized the severity of her deed. The local news covered the outcome, calling it a rare but critical example of how even a suburban HOA official could commit a felony by undermining essential communications. They also highlighted my sister's testimony on the vital role of stable internet during crises. The story concluded with a sharp condemnation of Karen's petty motivations, overshadowed by the public interest in saving lives. After the verdict, Karen sold her house in Willowbend Park. She retreated from public view, presumably to avoid the glare of humiliation and possible incarceration depending on the sentencing outcome. The HOA wasted no time removing her from membership entirely and disclaiming her unauthorized sabotage. Ms. Colt took official leadership, pledging a new era of fairness and open dialogue about issues. The communal Wi-Fi, fully repaired and upgraded, remained a core amenity. People once again streamed, worked remotely, and, importantly, stayed connected to emergency updates without fear of sabotage. Meanwhile, Willowbend Park embraced a calmer, kinder environment. Freed from Karen's petty rules, neighbors found ways to manage noise or usage concerns through discussion rather than draconian measures. In the weeks that followed, the final sentencing hearing arrived. The judge handed down a serious punishment: significant fines to compensate the HOA for equipment costs, mandated community service, and a suspended jail sentence with strict conditions. If she violated any laws in the coming years, she'd face immediate imprisonment. Some neighbors felt it was lenient, but the restitution was substantial. Karen's finances and reputation were effectively shattered. Her dream of imposing a quiet, obedient neighborhood had backfired catastrophically. Thus ended Karen's reign of terror. Willowbend Park breathed a sigh of relief, turning the page on a shameful saga of sabotage during a crucial storm alert. In its wake, the community emerged stronger, forging deeper ties as they realized how reliant they were on shared resources and each other when crises struck. With Karen gone, the HOA restructured its approach to communal Wi-Fi usage. Instead of harsh restrictions, they formed a small tech committee that monitored network performance, offering guidelines for courtesy, like using headphones in common areas, but never imposing forced quiet hours. People appreciated this balanced approach, acknowledging everyone's needs while avoiding another meltdown like Karen's. The storm season ended with minimal damage statewide, but the memory lingered. Had we faced the full brunt of the hurricane, that sabotage could have been deadly. Many neighbors, especially older ones, openly thanked me and Ms. Colt for stepping up when Karen cut us off. We credited the entire community. Once the sabotage was exposed, nearly everyone acted in unison to restore communication and hold Karen accountable. Occasionally, we discussed the fiasco with new arrivals to Willowbend Park. They'd ask, "Is it true some woman cut off the internet in a hurricane?" We'd confirm it with a wry laugh, explaining how it led to her downfall. The story evolved into a cautionary local legend. Don't mess with crucial services in Willowbend Park, or you'll face the full wrath of neighborly justice and the State Communication Authority. My sister Serena visited one weekend. The board invited her to the clubhouse, presenting her with a small plaque reading, "Thank you for safeguarding Willowbend's communication." She accepted graciously, joking that we discovered a new frontier in public safety, policing rogue HOA members. The neighbors chuckled, but the sentiment was genuine. We recognized how integral her role was in ensuring the sabotage was taken seriously at the highest levels. Through winter and into the following year, Willowbend Park matured into a more harmonious neighborhood. Freed from Karen's stifling micromanagement, we found creative solutions for common issues, scheduling pool hours that suited families, designating a quiet zone in the clubhouse for those working remotely, and encouraging neighbors to voice concerns openly. The Wi-Fi never again faced sabotage. Indeed, usage soared as more folks embraced the convenience of staying connected anywhere in the community. At the next annual HOA election, Ms. Colt was elected president by a landslide, championing transparency and collaboration. She formed committees for events, landscaping, and technology, inviting broad participation instead of top-down mandates. The petty fines and threats once dreaded under Karen's rule disappeared. The monthly HOA meetings transformed into constructive forums rather than tense standoffs. People felt genuinely proud to live in a place that overcame adversity and grew from it. Occasionally, I'd reflect on how a single neighbor's meltdown nearly derailed us in a critical moment. If the hurricane had made a direct hit, lack of communication could have cost lives. The fact that we narrowly escaped tragedy amplified our gratitude for the second chance. Some residents installed personal backup systems or subscribed to their own data plans, deciding never again to rely solely on the communal network. But the communal Wi-Fi remained central, a symbol of shared resources done right, when not sabotaged. One breezy spring day, the neighborhood organized a community preparedness fair, co-hosted by the State Communication Authority and local emergency agencies. My sister Serena attended as a keynote speaker, addressing how neighborhoods can maintain resilient communications during crises. The event drew families from across the region. We had booths offering hurricane readiness tips, building code info, first aid demonstrations, and even a small table showcasing the new, robust Wi-Fi gear we'd installed post-sabotage. The turnout was impressive, a testament to how Willowbend Park had turned a negative fiasco into a platform for positive change. I recalled the hush over the crowd when Serena explained how vital real-time alerts are, referencing the debacle we faced. People listened intently, some glancing at each other with relief that we overcame that vulnerability. The fair ended with a communal barbecue, kids playing, neighbors laughing. The sense of unity was palpable. Afterward, Miss Colt approached me. "You realize none of this would have happened if you and your sister hadn't stepped in?" She was half joking but earnest. I replied that the entire neighborhood had played a part. She insisted, "Without your connections to the state, the sabotage might have been shrugged off as a minor HOA spat." Perhaps that was true, but I believe that any real attempt to hamper emergency comms was bound to attract severe blowback eventually. Still, I was glad we resolved it sooner rather than after a potential catastrophe. Time flowed, and Karen's name drifted into hushed memory. She never returned after selling her house, presumably seeking to rebuild her life elsewhere. The official record of her felony conviction remained, along with the restitution she paid. Meanwhile, Willowbend Park's once battered reputation brightened. Homes sold quickly, with many prospective buyers impressed by the strong sense of community. I continued living happily in my townhouse, thriving in my remote job. The Wi-Fi hummed reliably, supporting countless teleconferences. My neighbors and I planned potlucks, yard sales, and group volunteer outings. Freed from the dread of petty rules or sabotage, we discovered the best side of suburban living: collaboration, warmth, and creative problem-solving. Looking back, it amazed me how a petty noise complaint escalated to disabling the entire network during a potential hurricane meltdown. It was a prime example of how self-absorbed power can breed disastrous consequences. Karen, so obsessed with controlling quality of life, ironically threatened everyone's safety. But thanks to a robust community response, official condemnation, and a bit of luck with the storm's path, we avoided tragedy. The experience molded Willowbend Park into a more conscientious, prepared community, better able to handle future emergencies. Months turned to a full year since the infamous sabotage. During the next hurricane season, we faced milder storms, but folks felt calmer knowing they had stable internet and a direct line to official updates. My sister Serena occasionally sent me new tips to share with neighbors, reinforcing best practices for emergency communication. People took them to heart. We established a volunteer emergency liaison system, so every street had a designated contact who'd maintain a backup phone or radio. This synergy meant that if a bigger crisis loomed, we'd never be fully cut off from life-saving information. The local press occasionally revisited the HOA Karen fiasco as a cautionary tale. They'd update readers that Willowbend Park was now recognized as a model community for readiness. Ms. Colt gave an interview praising how adversity led us to adopt robust solutions. She politely declined to speak further about Karen, not wishing to dwell on negativity, focusing instead on the transformation. The story resonated with audiences. A small neighborhood overcame sabotage from within, strengthening communal bonds in the process. I felt content seeing the fiasco fade into a lesson, not a lingering wound. Freed from Karen's pettiness, the neighborhood thrived. Freed from the shadow of what might have been a tragic meltdown, we built a culture of empathy and caution. Freed from fear that Wi-Fi or other critical resources could vanish at a single official's whim, we discovered how power truly resides in the collective will of everyday neighbors. Today, Willowbend Park stands as a testament to resilience and unity. The fiasco that erupted when an HOA Karen disconnected our communal Wi-Fi during a statewide weather emergency ended with her downfall and legal repercussions. She hadn't realized I, Noelle Patterson, had direct ties to the State Communication Authority through my sister, Serena, giving our community the leverage to swiftly rectify her reckless sabotage. In the aftermath, our neighborhood overcame fear and confusion, rallying around shared values of safety and cooperation. Freed from Karen's overbearing grip, the HOA embraced a kinder, more transparent governance style. Residents no longer tiptoe around petty noise complaints or internet usage gripes. Instead, we approach challenges with respectful dialogue. The fiasco, ironically, became a catalyst for improved emergency preparedness and deeper neighborly bonds. Gone is Karen, the meddling tyrant who nearly jeopardized lives to quell a late-night streaming session. In her place, we celebrate a renewed sense of belonging and relief. When storms approach or any crisis emerges, we can trust that our communal network, both technologically and socially, won't be severed by a single, self-appointed enforcer. The moral is clear. No personal vendetta should override vital communication systems, especially in times of grave public need. And so Willowbend Park flourishes with stable Wi-Fi, ready for teleworkers like me, for families streaming entertainment, for seniors emailing grandkids, and for everyone checking emergency alerts during storm season. We remain watchful, cherishing the knowledge that vigilance, unity, and the power of state-level support overcame Karen's sabotage. A once frightening fiasco ended with a bright, collective victory, proving that, in the end, a supportive and well-informed community will always outlast the destructive impulses of even the most domineering Karen.